Gentlemen, we went over the rules in the dressing room. I want a good, clean fight. Obey my commands at all times. Shake hands. Good luck to both of you.
George Foreman hoping to extend his winning streak to 72-3 with 66 knockouts over Pierre Coetzer, certainly a formidable opponent. Phil, tell us what to look for in tonight's bout.
Well, I think the key thing will be, can Foreman do some damage to him early? If he can't, this guy Coetzer is a pretty good stayer. He's able to sustain punishment and keeps coming. He showed very well against Riddick Bowe that he's got the ability to withstand punches and keep coming.
Pierre Coetzer is going to establish that in-your-face kind of attack, and he has to do that against a larger and more powerful George Foreman.
He's circling and he's busy. He'll try to score points early and hope that the fight is still there after 5-6 rounds.
George Foreman starts out very tentative at the center of the ring. He would come out, he would be busy, he would be the busier of the two. Certainly he's the lighter of the two as he tries to score with left jabs and overhand rights.
Mostly Foreman's able to ward off those punches with his forearms and upper arms.
George Foreman known for a huge right hand. Is he going to look to deliver that early on, or?
He hits with both hands. He's got that short clubbing left hand, and he can bomb with both hands.
Early on in the first round, Pierre Coetzer staying very busy against George Foreman, circling him somewhat like a younger, lighter pup against an older dog, if you will. George Foreman stalking his opponent, but not doing any damage early on. He'll throw his left out there and hope, of course, for that huge right hand.
Jab is scoring well. It looks like there's a little blood on the bridge of Coetzer's nose.
George Foreman now begins to back up Pierre Coetzer with left jabs. Certainly the left jab moments ago flicked the head back of Pierre Coetzer.
He pounds that jab. You know, from the very beginning of his comeback, George was able to throw the jab as he did in the old days. A lot of other things about his style have changed, but that jab is still a pounding, piston-like machinery.
Blood continued to trickle out of the bridge of the nose of Pierre Coetzer as George Foreman does damage early on. Pierre Coetzer, to his credit, continues to stay busy, continues to be in the face of George Foreman.
But it's Foreman who's really controlling this fight, very patiently pounding away with the jab, and Coetzer really not able to penetrate and do any damage. Certainly it's Foreman who's setting the pace and the tone of the fight.
And we come to the end of round number one, scheduled 10-round fight. It's a heavyweight championship, not the championship, excuse me, it's a heavyweight fight.
Anywhere near the kind of cut that can get him in trouble.
And we're set for round number two. Scheduled 10-round fight between George Foreman and Pierre Coetzer. What many of the promoters hope is that George Foreman will dispatch Pierre Coetzer, and Tommy Morrison and Foreman will fight later in the year.
Yeah, they're looking to April 16th at Caesar's Palace. That's the more than tentatively scheduled fight, and there's more blood now on Coetzer's face.
Early on, talking with Larry Merchant, I asked him about Foreman's reason for continuing, and he said, you know, many people, be they Foreman fans or otherwise, would like to see Foreman come out and say, hey, I'm still in it for the money. But at what point does a guy that seems to have all the money that he needs to sustain his family, probably many families, why does he continue to fight? Why does he need to fight?
I think he's looking for another title shot. That's what he said. And as the #1 IBF, eventually it'll come. His mandatory term will come. The other side of the token is that as far as marquee attractions, Foreman is kind of it for the two champions.
George Foreman at the age of 44, a stunning success story in terms of his comeback trail in the 7th round of his heavyweight championship fight with Evander Holyfield. almost pulled off the unthinkable, certainly the miraculous, when he had Holyfield seemingly in trouble. Foreman lost by a decision, but he continues with his quest for that elusive championship.
And tonight he's really controlling this fight with one punch, that pounding jab. Foreman enough damage to turn this fight around. Unless we see George physically wilt soon, it looks like he's just going to chop this guy down.
As you had said earlier, Phil, George Foreman's left jab, certainly credible. It seems to make the whole body of Coetzer shudder when he connects.
Yeah, that's a powerful punch. It was a powerful punch when he was a young 220-pound svelte guy, and it's still a potent punch right now.
But can he fight the values of a Riddick Bowe and young fighters like that with devastating punches as well?
Well, you know, this guy has a puncher's chance against anybody. Does he beat them? The odds he'll go into those fights an underdog. But he pounds pretty good. He's put guys on the floor. So, you know, he's as credible as a lot of guys out there. Foreman is going to physically fade at all, whether he's in good enough condition to keep administering this kind of pounding with that jab.
His way of saying, I'm 44 years old, but I can stay in there with the best of them.
He's done that from the first fight of his comeback against Steve Zowski in Sacramento back in 1986, March 1986.
Head heavyweight card tonight between George Foreman and Pierre Coetzer. Coetzer coming out, busy in the center of the ring, flicking left jabs. Those left jabs do not seem to have the same power, the same impact as a George Foreman jab.
Not at all the kind of mosquito punches, you know, annoying, busy, but they haven't changed the tone of this fight, the tenor of this fight.
With that right hand, Pierre Coetzer seems to be bothering George Foreman somewhat.
I see Foreman just continue to pound him. So far, he's having no problems. There was a good shot by Coetzer.
If he can score with the right, that could be the deciding blow. It sends Coetzer to the canvas. Phil, talking with Cedric Kushner earlier about Pierre Coetzer, he seemed to think that the Bowe fight came too soon, or the Bruno fight came too soon after the Bowe fight. Do you think the fight against Riddick Bowe took that much out of Pierre Coetzer?
Well, it's 2 fights in a row he's lost, and I think that develops a psychology when you start losing, that you know that you don't see your career the same way. And he's certainly doing nothing here to indicate that he can damage Foreman. Foreman seems to feel very much in control.
George Foreman, with that strength, with that wisdom of the ages, if you will, being a 44-year-old heavyweight that's ranked number 1 by the IBF, number 4 by the WBC, and number 4 by the WBA. Foreman knows that he can continue through the later rounds. He proved that against Evander Holyfield, going the distance against a much younger heavyweight. And here he continues to allow the punches by Pierre Coetzer to at least land, but certainly not do any damage, and then moves in for his own destruction.
Cool, methodical.
Pierre Coetzer throwing a strong overhand right and a crisp left, but having no effect on George Foreman. As we come to the end of the round here at the Reno-Sparks Convention Center, this is our main event of heavy damage. George Foreman against Pierre Coetzer. Phil, has George Foreman established a rhythm, if you will, in this fight thus far?
Absolutely. It's predicated on the jab, and it's just a constant pounding that's been able to control the fight. And on his end, Coetzer simply is not physically strong enough and not punching hard enough to turn that rhythm around.
Phil, watching fighters from the past, it seems
one of his assets as an attraction is that he's able to give contenders a good fight by staying a lot of rounds. Gave a good fight to Riddick Bowe, gave a good fight to Frank Bruno, and that's by virtue of those 2 defeats, solid defeats, so to speak. He's here tonight to make a payday.
Circle Foreman without getting in there and mixing it up.
He's here to fight.
George Foreman continues to stalk Pierre Coetzer.
Ooh, that was a good left hook.
Strong left and a right following up, sending Pierre Coetzer to the mat. George Foreman stalking his man and waiting for the opportunity that came in a lightning flash. George Foreman, very calm, very cool, very collected, continues to stalk Pierre Coetzer. Continues to wade in, throwing
good shots to the body. Good shots to the body.
Capacity crowd here at the Reno-Sparks Convention Center on its feet as George Foreman continues to stock and throw lefts and rights to Pierre Coetzer.
Very impressive the way he's making every punch count.
Huge left and rights. There's another left jab from George Foreman. Pierre Coetzer, very game, throws a left to the head of George Foreman, and he flicks them away and then comes in for his own damage. And we're down to a minute left in round number 4 of the scheduled 10 rounds. Phil, you've got to admire the staying power of this Pierre Coetzer.
Right. Well, George just turned to referee Cortez, asked him to stop it, and got hit in the bargain as Coetzer threw a right hand.
Pierre Coetzer staying in there, being a very game fighter.
You know,
George Foreman continues to unload heavy right and left shots to the head of Pierre Coetzer, and this man continues to stay on his feet.
the question is whether George would just like the fight to end quickly, or it's the compassionate heart of a veteran fighter not wanting to dish out any more punishment than necessary. Coetzer just seems to be very much on the receiving end now. There doesn't seem to be an awful lot left.
Well, we'll be coming to the end of round number 4. It's scheduled to go 10 rounds here at the Reno-Sparks Convention Center, and this capacity crowd is on its feet to celebrate, to cheer on their hero, George Foreman.
He put a lot of good shots on Coetzer's body.
Let's take a look at that stinging left from George Foreman. Pierre Coetzer's response was something in the arena of delayed reaction, I think.
Yeah, well, it was the left that did it, and he followed through with the right, but he was on his way down by then.
Throw dramatic punches, but those punches have power behind them.
Well, you know, he was very methodical and staying well within himself in the earlier rounds, and here he just stepped it up a notch or two and started loading up with the home run punches.
We're in round number 5, a scheduled 10-round fight. Foreman in the red with white trim, Coetzer in the blue with white trim.
And Foreman, even though he had Coetzer in big trouble in the previous round, still fighting very self-contained, very much within himself.
Very conservative, I would say.
Absolutely.
I have to ask the question, Phil, and that is after the pummeling that Foreman took at the hands of Alex Stewart, do you think that took something off of his fighting edge?
Well, that's kind of the mystery to tonight's fight. And you wondered when Foreman looked over to Joe Cortez, kind of cueing him to stop the fight.
And scores with left rights. Not doing a lot of damage, certainly opening himself up to the power of George Foreman, but game nonetheless.
And Foreman's able to parry most of those shots with his gloves. There you see that cross-arm defense. Touch of Archie Moore was involved in the corner earlier in this comeback.
Left jab from Foreman walks ahead of Pierre Coetzer, and another left jab takes Pierre Coetzer by surprise and takes him off balance. Sensing that, George Foreman beginning to stalk his opponent. Another left jab, all finding their mark and all having effect. We're in the 5th round of a scheduled 10-round fight. It's a heavyweight fight between George Foreman and Pierre Coetzer. George Foreman wins this, and thus far he seems to have had complete control of the bout. He's scheduled to fight Tommy Morrison, who earlier defeated Carl Williams.
Good shots by Foreman. Went to the body first, opened him up, and then rammed those rights and lefts to the head.
Blood continues to stream down the bridge of the nose of Pierre Coetzer.
And onto Foreman's chest. A little bit, yes.
Elbow with an elbows.
we come to the beginning of round number 6 here at the Reno-Sparks Convention Center. Main event, heavyweight bout between George Foreman and Pierre Coetzer. Referee Joe Cortez seemingly playing a background role in this fight. He's not as active, certainly, as a more pugnacious Mills Lane.
Yeah, Joe had, of course, the Holyfield Bowe fight, and there were a lot of complaints from Team Holyfield about the way he handled that fight. He felt that he was letting Bowe get away with a lot of hitting on the brakes, hitting low. Didn't do much about it.
Pierre Coetzer continues to flick out those left jabs. They are having some effect on George Foreman as he's showing puffiness around his eyes and certainly around his temples.
But you know, the control belongs all to Foreman still. That really hasn't changed. He's just pounding away, using the left to orchestrate, and then coming back behind it with both hands.
And Pierre Coetzer seems
good uppercut,
to be able to withstand a Riddick Bowe, although he was decimated by Bowe. He seems to be handling himself pretty well against George Foreman.
But I'll tell you something, I find Foreman's performance, given his age and how he fought against Alex Stewart, far more intriguing, far better performance. He's very controlled, very measured, looking very...
Foreman now going on the offensive against Pierre Coetzer, finding an opening, seemingly a fatigued Pierre Coetzer who gamely comes back.
You know, I said that Foreman's performance is a very strong one tonight, and it's compounded by the fact that he's been busy doing commercials. I was in LA a couple of weeks ago when he shot the pilot of a sitcom that Tony Danza is co-producing.
Foreman seemingly having Coetzer in the corner and not able to corner him and keep him there and inflict damage, but those lefts still continue to connect to the chin of Pierre Coetzer. One of the things that was said earlier in this week in the press, Phil, was that possibly George Foreman's attention was going to other projects, the commercial, the pilot coming out soon. Do you think that that is taking away from his boxing performance?
Not at all. As I said, it's all the more amazing that he's able to stay so focused and fight within himself tonight, given that he's been distracted and had other things on his agenda.
And we come to the end of round number 5 at the Reno-Sparks Convention Center. Methodical stalking by George Foreman. There's that left jab and the right cross from George Foreman that gets... in a stronger fashion as he was early in the fight. He had that problem against Alex Stewart where he seemed to fade. And we're at the beginning of round number 7, scheduled 10-round heavyweight fight between George Foreman and Pierre Coetzer. And George certainly does not stay away from his game plan, which is, as you said, methodical. He seems to be studying his opponent, looking for the opening and not giving up too much in the way of energy.
I gotta guess that he looked at that Bowe fight and realized that in Coetzer he's got a guy who's very much able to withstand punishment. There was a good right by Coetzer.
Coetzer coming back very gamely.
As you said, blood around the nose and the eye, right eye.
Certainly to the credit of Pierre Coetzer that he is able to continue, that he's able to keep on with his onslaught. He's very game. He's not shy in any way with George Foreman.
Well, this guy earns his paydays.
There's a right shot from George Foreman. Stuns Pierre Coetzer for a moment. And he's back into his dance and he's got his guard. Look for a South African home card. What do you think Franz Botha would do with Pierre Coetzer?
Well, you know, we saw him against Cowboy Billy Wright, and that's hardly a gauge of what kind of fighter Botha is. He hasn't had the head rallying shots by Foreman, hasn't had the kind of competition. I'd be inclined to go with Coetzer.
Tops of his toes. And wades in and try to do some damage on George Foreman.
They threw a good left-right combination. but I just don't think he appears to have the power to discourage Foreman.
Coetzer with 2 lefts to the left eye of George Foreman. George Foreman continues to swell somewhat. As the swelling starts out earlier than the previous fights.
I see some blood on Foreman's face, but I believe that's Coetzer's blood.
And we come to the end of round number 7. The Reno-Sparks Convention Center, the card is heavy damage, and this is the main event. George Foreman and Pierre Coetzer. Scheduled 10-round heavyweight fight between George Foreman and Pierre Coetzer. Foreman in the red, Pierre Coetzer in the blue with white trim. It's round number 8, looks like round number 1. Foreman comes out to the center ring, beginning to stalk his opponent. Pierre Coetzer on his toes, flicking out left jabs.
He really doesn't have to do heavy stalking. That's why this is a good opponent for Foreman. Coetzer, by and large, is there within range and ready to fight. And that kind of opponent is a good opponent for George Foreman. Nothing fancy about Coetzer.
Bill, right now, the 8th round, is Foreman looking for a knockout? Is he just looking to come away with a decision?
He still seems to be fighting within himself, not throwing home run punches, just pounding away.
Scoring easily there.
Very powerful jabs.
With the kind of power that George Foreman has, very little defensive man can have against those pummeling pistons of arms that he has.
You use your legs to get out of the way. Coetzer's not a dancing master by any stretch of the imagination. He's a capable athlete, capable fighter, but doesn't appear to have the overpowering strength.
There's some strong left-right combination by George Foreman that buckles Pierre Coetzer, and a right sends the South African to the canvas.
5, 6, 7.
We have over a minute left in round number 8 as George Foreman has sent Pierre Coetzer to the canvas.
Second time in the fight that he scored a knockdown.
He wades in now with uppercuts that seem to take their toll, and Joe Cortez takes a cue and stops the fight.
Very impressive performance by George Foreman. Very impressive.
Well, I have to ask you, we were watching a man who was game through the whole fight. Pierre Coetzer, a game opponent of George Foreman, and he kept coming back and coming back. Do you think the fight should have been stopped?
No, I thought that Cortez's timing was perfect. At that moment was the right time to stop it.